One man caravan, loving tiny living, looking for adventure down by the river.
Good freezing morning. Aaron here. It is 17 degrees outside and I'm just getting dressed from taking a piping hot shower in my 6x12 cargo trailer conversion tiny home. And I thought, well, that's a good morning to talk about how I stay warm and how I don't sacrifice anything, even though it's so cold outside, and live super comfortably. So my outside temperature gauge says it's 18, and I know there's a C next to it, but that's just the number of the outside temperature gauge. There's an F right above it for Fahrenheit, and it's 71 inside. But the weather app says it's 17. So is it 17 or is it 18? Doesn't matter. It's cold. The number one most important thing about staying warm or really cool in the summer is insulation. You have to invest in good insulation. I used rigid foam in this trailer build in 2018. Rmax is the brand because it had the highest R value. I only have 1 inch in the walls and 2 inch in the ceiling and floor available for me to insulate, because if I made the walls any thicker, I wouldn't have been able to fit in my Murphy bed and open it all the way, and I would have other issues just because it's so narrow in here.
All right, and another wall insulated. Just like that. You just cut it, put it in.
But with that 1 inch in the wall, you get an R6 rating, and with the 2 inches in the ceiling and the floor, it's an R13. And a typical house with a 2x4 wall with that fiberglass pink insulation has an R13 to R15. So pretty good considering the tight space that I have to insulate with. So that's the groundwork. You have to invest in good insulation if you want to do a cargo trailer build out. You will regret it if you don't. So even with good insulation, you still gotta have heat, right? And I think another super important thing is a dehumidifier. If you live in a tiny house or an RV during the winter, you can see, even though it is 17 out and it's 71 inside, my windows are dry, and typically they would be like raining water and you wouldn't be able to see out of them, and it creates all kinds of issues on the wall below it. It creates mold. And in the back of your cupboards, like especially for me in the front of my house in the kitchen where the wall meets the floor, it got really cold there at night and it would condensate, and I had mold under there. The first 2 years I lived in here that I was constantly having to take everything out of the cupboard and clean that out. So this dehumidifier, big deal. So that is how I dehumidify my house. Not with a compressor-driven dehumidifier, but with this desiccant wheel warm air dehumidifier. So there's a small wheel that spins in there with desiccant in it, and it blows warm air over it. This one's called an Ivation. I'll put a link to that below as well. So it blows out about 100-degree air, and you can set the humidity from 35 to 85 or continuously run. I like to keep it at about 40. Below that, it gets a little too dry for me. And then as supplemental heat, I have this little tiny ceramic heater, and on setting number 1, it only takes 700 watts, and I just set that at 70 degrees and it cycles on and off, and the two together do an excellent job. Let's look at the humidity and see what it is right now. So we're at 39%. So there is a winter storm coming and it's already raining. You can probably hear it on my tin roof. But the Mr. Buddy is my backup source of heat when the power goes out, and it's excellent. Even on low, I can keep my house any temperature I want and have to turn it off pretty regularly. But for long-term heat, it's just not a good option because the combustion causes too much moisture. Even though I have the dehumidifier, when I get out of the shower, or in the morning when I'm heating up my coffee and my shower water, because that's a gas stove, I do ventilate. And it still stays warm in here. It'll get down to like 68, 67 when I'm running the MaxAir fan with the vent open. But yeah, I do ventilate in the winter. That's important too. The back vent open? I don't have the Max fan running because when I do, it has a little tiny squeak and it sounds horrible on video. I do put an insulated cover on my AC every year because a lot of cold air seeps in through that, and that's right at the foot of my bed and it goes onto my feet, and that can get pretty cold. But as far as the two roof vents, I don't put any insulated pads up in those because I use them every day, and it just doesn't feel like enough cold air comes through those that affects me, and I'm able to keep my house whatever temperature I want, so I just forego that. I do not have issues with water freezing because while I'm connected to my RV park's pressurized water system, it's not turned on because I only turn it on to fill up my tanks, because I live off my water tank inside of my tiny house, and then I pump it up to gravity tanks in the ceiling, and that's how I'm able to have water no matter how cold it is outside. And my gray tanks are in here as well. Now the valves go outside, but I don't think it matters that they freeze because they're not under pressure, and it's my 7th year in this house and it freezes every winter and they're still working fine. The only tank under the house is the black tank, and I think because of what's in it, it doesn't freeze as much, but if it does, it's never given me any problems. So my water tank is right down there at the bottom of the kitchen, and then that's the gray tank for the kitchen. And then I heat up my own shower water with this giant 1.5 gallon tea kettle, and there's a whole video on that too. And then I manually pump it over to my shower tank up there. And that's how I don't have any frozen water issues in the winter. While some of my neighbors, they do. And I'm just living comfortably. And just to show, my water does still run. No matter how cold it is. Gravity water. I love it. Let's take care of this. Very important. So even when it's freezing cold here where I live, it's always foggy. And that's where we get all the humidity from. Now, we gotta get this put up. So that my little buddies can have breakfast. So even when it's 19 degrees around here, I have this little group of hummingbirds that stay all winter. And it's not all of them, just a couple. But they go into a state called torpor at night, where they reduce their body temperature and metabolism, then they have to vibrate themselves out of it in the morning and eat right away. So I keep that hummingbird feeder in my house at night. My favorite feature of my Jeep, besides the 4-wheel drive, the remote start. Even in 2014 I had this option. That old Jeep just keeps on chugging. Here we go. Started. We're warming up. And I have another thing. If you look at the windshield, it's got a cover on it. It's called a frost blocker. If you live where it's cold, where it snows, you want one of those. All the rest of the windows are frozen, but that one. Frost blockers. Totally worth it. Let's see how frozen my little pond is this morning. We call it Lake Titicaca, because all the frogs poop in it. Frozen. It's cold. So what we struggle with where I live in the winter is this fog, because it's freezing cold outside and it freezes to everything, especially the roads. And you got to be real careful on this 1-lane bridge, because if you accidentally hop one of those metal rails on either side, you really can't get your tire off of it, and you become part of what they call the Bridge Club. And you don't want to be a member of the Bridge Club, ever. We're under a winter storm warning too right now, which means snow's coming. And while I have a super long commute to work, it's a mile, they don't plow this road, which is really steep that I'm going up. It's like a 220 foot elevation gain in like a quarter of a mile. And it's really narrow, especially right here. There's only room for about 1.5 cars. So good thing I have 4-wheel drive to get up that sucker in the morning. How's your commute to work? Even though I am far from Appalachia in Northern California in what they call the Shasta Trinity National Forest, those are mountains behind me, but they are all fogged in like they are every morning. So I think this should be called the Great Smoky Mountains as well. At the end of the day, the bottom line is, if you're going to build a cargo trailer and live in it, invest in insulation or you'll regret it. Cheers!